You're doing a great job sticking with me so far. In this video, we'll be discussing web development programming languages. We'll be looking at front-end technologies, back-end technologies, and database technologies. Let's get cracking. So to start off with, I want to look at the request and response through the stack. If you're not familiar with the stack, I suggest you check out my previous video on full-stack web applications in the description below. An HTTP request will often travel through the entire stack of a web application. We have our front-end, back-end, and database. Looking at a simple example of a user trying to log into their account, this request is passed from the front-end to the back-end. The back-end will then query the database to see if the email exists and if the correct password has been entered. The backend takes the user data stored in the database and compares it to what the user has entered. If the user exists and the passwords match, the user will be sent their dashboard on the front end. So when we talk about writing code, what exactly are we writing for in the context of the stack? On the front end, we write code. And this code the browser converts into UI. That is, the web pages you and I are interacting with. On the back end, we also write code. And on the database, we write queries, which helps us store, retrieve, and update data. Now, although you can interact with the database directly, it is more common to write these queries in the back-end code, where server-side languages and frameworks manage database interactions. We're going to now move through each part of the stack and look at the different technologies powering them, starting with front-end technologies. The front end of a web app is built using three core technologies. The first is HTML, which is the content. Here is a snippet of HTML, which is defining the content that is part of a navigation menu. Next is CSS, which makes the content pretty. Here is a snippet of CSS, styling some paragraph text. And then finally, we have JavaScript, which adds interactivity. Here is a snippet of a function that adds two numbers together. HTML and CSS are not programming languages. They cannot perform logical operations. On the other hand, JavaScript is a programming language. It can perform logical operations. All three of these are used on most web pages. I say most as it is technically possible just to have an HTML website. But 99.99% of the experiences you and I are interacting with will be using all three technologies. We will be spending a lot of time going through each of these in detail, so do not worry about exactly what they each do just yet. For now, you just need to know they exist and that there are no other foundational languages besides these that power the front end. Moving on to back-end technologies. The backend of a website is built using a single server-side programming language. On the backend, we require a comprehensive programming language because it is responsible for executing complex logic and other critical functions. Examples of a server-side language include Node.js. At this point, just see this as the same thing as JavaScript, the same programming language we saw in the front end. Other server-side programming languages include PHP, Ruby, and Python, and you may have even heard of a few of these. Unlike the front end, where you have to use all three, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, on the back end, you can use any of these, and it is in fact very uncommon to use more than one on a single project. Now, there are a lot more server-side languages out there, but I'm just showing a few of the more common languages used in web development. Now, before we move on to talk about database technologies, I want to briefly discuss that although there are differences between server-side languages, there are a lot of similarities. Programming languages share similar underlying principles and concepts, but vary in syntax. Let's take a look at natural languages to explain this. While English and Spanish are quite different, they do share similar foundational rules, like having nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Looking at nouns, for example, the English noun territory is territorio in Spanish. Different, but similar. I love these TikToks making fun of German.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Sorpresa.
Sorpresa.
Überraschung.
I've posted a link of this in the description below. For programming languages, it is the same thing, but is actually a lot quicker to learn another language once you've understood one. Taking Node.js and Python as an example, similar to natural languages, they each have underlying constructs like variables, functions, and control flow. For example, in Node.js, a new variable is declared with const name equals Daniel, where I'm using a JavaScript keyword called const. In contrast, in Python, a variable is declared by just writing name equals Daniel, without requiring a keyword. At this stage, don't even worry about what a variable is. I just want to get the idea across that the underlying principle of creating a variable is the same, and even the syntax is not too different. The key takeaway here is that taking the time to properly learn one language will help you master other languages a lot faster. The learning curve will be a lot shorter. Looking at the last part of the stack, we have database technologies. There are two main types of databases. The first is relational, otherwise known as SQL or SQL. These databases stores data in tables and follow strict rules. Think of a Google Sheet. Popular relational databases include PostgreSQL and MySQL. The other type of database is called non-relational, or NoSQL. These databases stores data in documents and allow for more flexibility. Think of a folder of Google Docs. Popular non-relational databases include MongoDB and DynamoDB. Let's continue to build our Introduction to Web Development summary card. In this video, we looked at languages. We've seen that each component of the stack, the front end, back end, and database, each have their own foundational languages. The core languages of the front end are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The back end can use any server-side programming language, like Node.js. And the database can be a relational database, like PostgreSQL, or a non-relational database, like MongoDB. Don't forget, you can download all the summary cards and presentation slides from the bootcamp in the link in the description below. You're smashing it. Click here to move on to the next video in the playlist, and click here to subscribe to the channel to get updates on new releases.